got a big victory to announce today from the ACLJ, and it's on behalf of those whistleblowers. And let me tell you something, folks. Being a whistleblower is no easy task, and we know that from Washington, D.C. We can take you back to a year and a month ago, right, last August, when people like Marcus Allen and Garret O'Boyle got up in front of Congress and the American people and testified about what happens when you question the authorities within the FBI, going through the proper channels, okay, not trying to, again, subvert your job, but going through the proper channels, and what happens to you internally. Your job's taken away, your pay's taken away, but you can't get another job, and your security clearance hangs in the balance, so you can't utilize that to get a job in the private sector. Remember, we represent Marcus Allen. We also represent Garret O'Boyle. So Marcus Allen was a Marine. He served in Iraq, received numerous awards. He also received the Employee of the Year award at the FBI. Then he sent an email to his superior. This was about, again, he was specifically questioning the narrative that was coming out of the FBI about January 6th. Now, this is when the FBI was in its phases trying to figure out exactly, remember the January 6th committee? Remember, they were coming to exactly who was responsible, how organized was it? You know, how much thought went into this? Was it pre-planned? Was it a crowd that got out of control? And shouldn't, if you're the FBI, part of your job to investigate is to figure out, you know, what do you think was the likely case? You can make the best report possible, and then people that are higher up than you can take that information, do with it what they want. The Department of Justice can decide ultimately to prosecute or not. They have decided to do that with some individuals, but they didn't like that Marcus was even looking at this specific narrative. So they suspend his pay, but they don't fire you.
Right.
So they keep you in limbo, but what they also do is they take your security clearance, keep that in limbo, which basically keeps you out from being able to say, I quit, I'm going to the private sector. So today we can announce Marcus has been vindicated, and he's gotten his top secret security clearance back.
He was unable to seek outside work because he was still technically an employee of the FBI, so he couldn't go work for someone else. Could not receive gifts because that would appear that he was maybe improperly receiving a gift for how his employment would work at the FBI. They didn't want any odor of mendacity, as we've heard in some other cases, over his employment, although he could not work. And also, they, as you mentioned, suspended his security clearance. So he couldn't just leave the FBI and go work somewhere else, because that's a valuable asset that he has to make himself marketable in a similar field.
You see, these individuals were doing their job. They were going to, in Garret O'Boyle's case, he was just starting a new position with the FBI the day he gets suspended. He had just moved, just had a child, and that day he gets suspended. I mean, they're not trying to become, you know, a name in this in the world that we work in. But they have to survive, and ultimately then to seek justice, which, I mean, I'm glad groups, I thank our donors and your donors to Empower Oversight, because, again, to fight these 2-year battles against an agency that has an endless coffers to go and try to take these rights away from individuals and ruin their life so that they can't even work. I mean, it maybe walk people, Tristan, to the power of these security clearances to have that top secret clearance. When that's suspended, you can't just say, well, I quit, I'll go get a job. I mean, it's like your life is on hold.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a FBI unique construct. So other agencies as well, if your security clearance is suspended, you're not able to work. But the FBI particularly uses the suspension of security clearances very frequently for cases that have nothing to do with security allegations. So, you know, again, in this case for Marcus Allen, it was disclosures to his leadership about FBI Director Chris Wray potentially misleading Congress in his testimony. That's a significant disclosure. And so if there are concerns about that, there's ways that the FBI could respond to that. But suspending a security clearance sets off a process where he's without pay. Any request for outside work was denied. And so that's where you end up with him receiving 27 months of back pay, because for all of that time, he was unjustly, not compensated. And so now he has both his back pay, his benefits, all of this coming back to him. But you think of how long someone, going that long without a paycheck, it's just outrageous. Yeah. And again, you don't see that in most other agencies. And of course, the Justice Department Inspector General put out a report just several weeks ago talking about how this is really a stacked deck against whistleblowers, because even if someone absolutely does everything in the right way, makes protective disclosures, absolutely is a whistleblower, the kind of person we want to protect, the FBI has no obligations to move quickly in any way on that security clearance adjudication. So that's why Marcus went a year before there was ever a proposed revocation. And then once they proposed the revocation, we requested the documents behind it. It's another 6 months before we get the documents. We write a response to them. It's another 6 months before we get a decision here. And so this is just a process that's designed to squeeze out whistleblowers, to bleed them drop by drop.
Well, this is it. I mean, it's a gigantic win. You and I were talking about this last night. I mean, it is very rare that the government will concede a case, which is what they've done here, and reinstate a security clearance, usually, and they have done this in cases we're involved in, they dig their heels in. But in this particular case, we pushed back very aggressively. As you mentioned, Garret O'Boyle case, we are in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia on that one. That's where that actually starts the litigation there at the Court of Appeals. But I cannot underscore enough the significance of this win. It's a win for Marcus Allen, but as important, it's a win for the American people, that a whistleblower will not be denied their security clearance, which ends up becoming how they make a living. Jordan, as you mentioned, this was a decorated military veteran, a decorated member of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and when they lose their security clearance, they are basically unemployable at that time. And here we've seen not only the reestablishment of his security clearance, which will change his family's trajectory, but also a vindication of his rights, that he was well within his rights when he spoke out, and the government had to concede that he did nothing that violated his clearance. So that's a huge win. I mean, I think it's in the realm of security clearance, it's the biggest win we've ever seen.
We're getting some momentum, and you were so right earlier. Our supporters allow us, and they to take on these battles, to turn their gifts into action, meaningful action that's changing the dialogue and changing the conversation here in Washington. And that's hard to do. Every one of us part of this broadcast understands how hard it is to change things in Washington and to go against the establishment. In our clients, Garret O'Boyle, the one you mentioned with our appeal pending in the D.C. Circuit, and then in Marcus Allen, who we just got this huge win for, are testimonial to that. I mean, their bravery and their courage is commendable, Jordan. I mean, you want to talk about putting your money where your mouth is and being at the tip of the spear. These guys stood up to the beast. You know what? And we were able to stand up with them. And we're getting results. We got the FBI on our appeal for Garret O'Boyle. They tried to stop our appeal and have it tossed out before it even got started. We got past that successfully. We're at the merit stage. That's coming up. You mentioned our brief is due Friday. We're working on that too. And it's just, there's so much going on, but we get to stand with these folks because of our supporters, and I'm so grateful for that.